Hello, everyone. I have to welcome all of you for being part of this ESOR sustainability course. I have to thank a lot to the speakers because they took time to prepare the presentation and to be here with us. As you may know, this course is a part of sustainability lectures. There are 5 courses all over the year. This is the second one, and the next one will be on 30th of June. So please join us also to the others lectures in this session of sustainability in radiology. I don't know how it's in your country, but in my country it's very, very cold. So I will start with a joke. Do you know why did the sustainability expert love cold weather? I hope that you all know, because nothing says carbon footprint reduction like Mother Nature turning down the thermostat for free like it is in my country now. There are 10 degrees now, right now. Anyway, you can ask questions all over the lecture. You can ask the questions in the Slido, and we will answer it after the presentation, or if we can join the last part when we will have the Q&A session. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I will introduce the speakers. My name is Ioana Gheonea, and I'm coming from Romania, Craiova, University of Medicine and Pharmacy, and I will be moderating this session with our speakers. First of our speaker will be Tobias Heye. Hello, Tobias. Thank you for being here with us. And your microphone is yours. Please start the session.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. I will start sharing my screen right now. And hopefully you all can see now my slides. So let's get into it. Powering radiology responsibly, and my goal was task was to show you how to optimize energy and data use. First off, I have to disclose that I have a research contract with Siemens Healthcare actually on sustainability. So why are we talking about this? What's the problem? This probably most of you already know that if you take global healthcare as an entire nation, we would come in as number 5 with around 5% of global CO2 emissions. But remind you that this is the global average. Usually Western industrialized countries, they have around 10 or even more % of their national emission that's coming from healthcare. And this CO2 is causing problems. If you look at planetary temperatures, the last 2-3 years, you can see the sea surface temperature here. And also the air surface temperature is quite different from what it used to be the last 10 or 20 years. So there's indication that the buffer effect of the land and the sea is used up, and that we may enter like a tipping point. So we have to do something about it. And also if you look at CO2 emissions over the last 800,000 years, we look at our planet's history, we're actually right now here. And over these years, we've never been there. Quite over 400. The highest it was around 300 something before. So we're in an uncharted territory when it comes to CO2 emissions. So what about radiology in this context? What's our share here? Well, if I look at my hospital, the units who have the highest energy demand is radiology and nuclear medicine, and it's followed by other radiation, or not radiation, it's followed by radiation oncology. But basically, these other services, they have modalities that are high in energy consumption. And this is an estimation, not a measurement, but the brighter red shows our contribution radiology in terms of the entire hospital energy consumption that we have. So it's quite a bit overall. There's interesting work being done on this. If you look at Australia, they looked at one of their areas, New South Wales, and 9% of the entire carbon footprint comes from radiology and pathology. They assessed those together. And they have broken it up into separate components. For CO2 emissions, we come in as fourth with pathology, water use number 3, and waste also number 3. It's only beaten by the actual building itself, which usually has a high impact, and pharmaceutical goods and other goods. So radiology and pathology both are quite intense in their energy consumption. A nice number that they put out is also a nice comparison we can use. If you look at what is the mean CO2 emissions per different scans, so MRI and CT are quite high compared to chest X-ray, other X-ray, and ultrasound. So there's a more than 10-fold increase between those. So this gives you one of the first takeaway messages. If possible, we can switch from high carbon to low carbon imaging studies, and we'll look into that later on, just to have this comparison in mind when you try to achieve a decrease in emissions. Another problem that comes in, we also address later, is that there's increase in low value imaging, and at least in our area, we see an increase of the coverage of body region that's done per scan. So CT abdomen then becomes the chest, abdomen, pelvis. A very recent study in radiology looked at 10 years of operation for a US diagnostic radiology department, and they assessed where the greenhouse gas emissions comes from. And as you can see here, it's broken up into different modalities and other areas of the department. So close to half just comes from MRI. Then a big chunk also comes from CT operations, and X-ray is also a contributor, and also PEC storage here. So these are the main big things that contribute to gas emissions, CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. And if we look further into this, if we look at all those modalities, the different modalities they have here, the majority where the greenhouse gas emissions comes from over these 10 years is the green stuff, and that's the energy use. So the rest is actually quite marginal, be it the production or other supplies that you use. So energy is the main driver here most of the time. And if you then look into the operation modes of those different modalities, you can see a nice or interesting distribution. There's the low power mode in orange, in yellow there's the ready to scan mode, and then there's the scan mode. Well, if you take the low power and ready to scan mode, that's actually where you don't do any imaging yet. You're just consuming energy, and that's non-productive energy consumption. And the time those modalities spend time in these operation modes, you can see are actually quite high. So they are idling around and consuming a lot of energy, but they're not productive for you. The productive part is only the green part here. And especially for angio and also in MRI, that's quite pronounced, the proportion of non-productive to productive energy consumption. I've tried to break it up a bit more here, just to compare it, why our modality is actually quite inefficient. So here is energy consumption. It goes up like this, and we separate these 3 operation modes. So first off, just a comparison, which I try to give you an understanding how they perform. If you switch them off, most of these devices still consume a fair amount of energy, and you can see MRI and PET-CT the most compared to angio and CT. But then you switch them on, and you're not doing any imaging. They're just on. They even consume even more energy, and the most is MRI and also angio and PET-CT. Now, this is when you don't operate your scanner, but you turn it on. Then you do the imaging, and imaging, of course, does also consume energy, but gives you a productive value from this. And just as a comparison, this little bar would be 1 kilowatt hours, and as a comparison, 100 hours of 10 watt light bulb operation you can do with 1 kilowatt hours, or 1 hour of dishwasher. So compare this, what you do here with our modalities, if they're not doing anything. That's the problem. The high idle energy consumption equals energy waste. And during off hours, when you don't turn them off, and during operation hours, when they're idle, that's where you lose energy that's not productive. If you look at this over time, we take an entire day and we compare leaving a system on or shutting down the system when it's not in use, if it's just a clinical daytime operation scanner, the potential reduction just by this can be between 20 to 70% in energy consumption. That's quite huge, just by turning it off. And the other part we have to look into is comparing different systems again here, is the amount of density of scanning that you do on these different devices. So MRI, we know these little blue spikes should be the scanning operation. It's quite dense, there's less idle time in between. But for CT, because CT is so fast in the image acquisition, you have more idle time in between. And for angiography, it's even more, because the actual scanning is really a tiny amount of the entire daytime operation. So addressing this idle time is also important. And these are just some rough numbers how inefficient these systems are. So if you look at all those modalities, and we came up with like a house of 4 people living in this. It's a freestanding house. As a comparison, a house in Switzerland, where our modalities stand. So ultrasound is quite efficient, but CT, 5 houses, angio units, 10 houses, PET-CTs, 10 houses, MRIs, 26 houses. And remind you, these are modalities that you already switch off during off hours. So if they would be kept on 24/7, these numbers would be more than double. And the problem is, as I mentioned, the high idle or off energy consumption that those devices have. And at least for my hospital, if we do the calculation with the major modalities, it's around 250 houses and around 1,000 people living in those. So a couple of solutions. We came up with a monitoring system that actually monitors the status of a system as being in its on state or off state. We're not monitoring the energy consumption, just showing if it's on or off. And we published this here, and with this QR code and the link down here, you can actually get a nice go on GitHub and see a manual how to install this on your system. It's vendor agnostic. It's not dependent on anything. Very low tech actually. And with that, you can find out if your systems are on or off. We actually found more systems that you can switch off, more modalities, more workstation, and so on. And per year, that's what we save. 22 tons of CO2, quite some money here. These are actually numbers for Switzerland. For Europe, these numbers would be triple in terms of CO2 emissions. And with that, you can create dashboards that you can distribute in your department. The dashboards, they can show you your workstations if they're shut down during the night, the MRIs, all devices all together. So with this, you can educate and show your people if the effort you're doing is worthwhile, and you can calculate the effect, which is a good positive reinforcement. And we also had to learn PET-CTs can be turned off. Initially, you can see here, we have 2 PET-CTs. The graph is a bit weird here, but this does mean 2. They're always on, and we learned to shut them off. And we built this dashboard that shows the savings in money, energy, and emissions. And now over more than 2 years, consistently shutting them off just for the PET-CTs, we get those numbers, quite some saving, energy saving. And again, the 5 tons of CO2, you have to triple this for the average Europe numbers. But I will get to this later. So this is one way of doing it. If you have an installation, and we're lucky to have that, where you actually monitor or you measure the energy consumption, there's a commercial solution which we develop with a partner, industry partner. So you can actually look at all your scanners. For example, here the MRIs. You can look at the operation, the live feed of the energy draw. You get some good calculations. You know where the energy demand comes from. It's quite helpful. You get like a heat map where you can see, do I shut off or shut down the systems during off hours or not? Where is the intensity? And then they give you some reports in the end, which also highlights excess cooling, excess electricity, where you can save if you want. And this you can get per month. So that was first monitoring the on-off state, and then secondary actually measuring the consumption and using reports and other things just to keep track of those things and change things. But we also have a lot of PCs, right? PCs and printers, and this is an example we always show here. So I was able to track all the PCs that are in our hospital. It's around 13,000 devices actually, but here we can see around 10,000 are online during the day. That's the yellow curve, and the blue areas is the night. And you can see how almost 8,000 devices are still online during the night, which is a bit much. We have around 6,000 to 7,000 employees. So just by calculating, if you just shut down 10% more of those devices, printers and PCs and whatnot, there's a huge saving in terms of energy per year. There's some saving also in costs. And again, here, these numbers tripled would be the emission savings. So we're in the tons of things that are running using energy and causing emissions, but they're not productive for your institution. So small stuff. There's always a discussion, well, my PC, if I don't shut it down, it doesn't matter. That's true, but if you scale it up, they do matter. When we present these things, we often get some replies, and actually we get a lot of those replies. Quite often we get some myth from the user base. And some people say, actually also very well-known installations worldwide, they say regularly turning off modalities, especially MRI seems to be quite a sensitive topic here, it does not break them. There's no increase in maintenance or warranty impact. Actually, the vendors, they say, yes, you should and you can shut them down. Further, there's no increased energy consumption when you have to more than once a day or just starting them up or shutting them down. There's a little bit of calibration sometimes for some systems, but that doesn't add up much energy. And also the vendors say up to around, starting from 1 hour shutting down, you actually end up having savings. Actually, so a lunch break shutdown could be possible. And then I encourage you to understand your devices and measure. Most devices really start quite quickly. So there's no need for 24/7 on for emergencies that are potential. Of course, we do have our emergency CT that's always on, that's 24/7. But the other clinical scanners that only have daytime operation, we shut them off. And we can prove that. Our angios, we have two radiology angios for interventions, the neuro and the body intervention. And you can see here this dashboard, the red areas is shutting them down on weekends and on nights. And we are a major stroke center. We have good door to groin times, and the startup time of those devices is 3 to 4 minutes. There's no emergency that I can think of that you will have the problem that the modality is not ready if you want to go. This is not possible. So look into those devices. Another area that I want to highlight is, and we did some hopefully soon published work on this. So if you take all our scheduling, it's usually done like a bit of a Tetris game. You plan humans plan the operation when you do what examinations, but it's not really optimized. There are gaps in between the schedule. So we took all our data from 2015, 3 CTs, and we used a mathematical optimizer. It's not even an AI or algorithm, like a deep learning algorithm. It's a mathematical optimizer. And the idea was can we optimize the operation in a way that you can shut down CTs earlier? And it turns out 1/3 reduction in daily energy consumption is possible if you move things around. And we also had some limitations in there. You couldn't freely move around patients. The emergencies and the intensive care unit CTs, they were not allowed to move around. But still, it's quite a difference. It's probably a quite optimistic approach, but realistically, maybe 10 to 50% reduction could be done if we would do a better scheduling. And finally, another area that I want to highlight is diagnostic yield or imaging waste. So these are our numbers. Every tiny blue dot here is one CT scan. And here we go up from 2011 to 2025. And here across we have 24 hours. So you see our daytime operation here gets more dense and dense because we do many more images, many more exams during the day. But you can also see the off hours. We actually have nighttime and late shift. They get also more dense. The difference between day and nighttime operation that disappears. So there's, as probably all of you know, in all your institutions, we do more and more imaging over time. But the solution is probably not that we put in another CT, although we have done that. We have to look into this. So one more lane will not fix this. At the same time, when we analyze this, here are all our CT chest, which were done for pulmonary embolism, and here's the detection rate. So here we see the negative where we did not find one, and this false rate is going up, and the positive, true positive rate is going down. So we do more imaging, but we are less precise in what we find. So that indicates that we have some imaging waste down here. At the same time, and we published this here, is we see a trend from chest X-ray to chest CT. And something that triggered this for sure was the COVID pandemic. As you can see before, we rarely did CT for pneumonia, but here this was done before. And then during COVID, we did, of course, a lot of CT for this, but then the referring physician, they learned that CT is probably easier, gives a bit more information and so forth. So it never recovered to this before. So we have to think about it, considering that chest X-ray to chest CT, there's a 10-fold increase in energy consumption emissions, that we really need to be aware that chest X-ray is still a very good tool to identify pneumonia in some or maybe most cases. So we take the recycling pyramid here, and we look at what we can do here: recover, recycle, reuse, reduce. So we're probably not doing a good job in using prior comparison that may exist somewhere else or even exist in our database. Pack storage is a topic we should look into. We'll discuss this briefly. And then we talked about this. There are low carbon imaging available, which we probably don't use as we should. And then there's a big amount what you can do is shorten the protocols in MRI and maybe CT, but this can be a tricky thing because there may be another effect playing into this, which I will talk about later. But then overuse of imaging, low value imaging, this could be quite huge if we look at this even more. It's considered that 20 to 50% of imaging may not be necessary. So we are avoiding a lot of emissions by preventing imaging that basically the patient does not benefit from. I'm not referring to images that or exams that come back and say, no, this patient does not have this disease. That doesn't mean it's low value imaging. It means really basically the patient doesn't profit from this. A negative scan may still be profitable for a patient, for the patient benefit. And then further, PAC sustainability. We may hear something about it from Rebecca, but we haven't really understood what we're doing with our PACs, right? At least for us, PACs is a huge data storage where we just dump stuff. We don't think about, do we need all this information? Do we just keep the thin slices? What do we have in there? Basically, in our PACs, we have 30% external imports. So these imports exist somewhere else in the PACs, but 30% of our PACs is used up by this. So do we still need this? We haven't really looked into a data lifecycle concept in radiology. Probably in medicine in general, this is a topic. So with all that, I want to address something that's called the Jevons paradox. And you can take many examples. It originates from the steam engine era, and here's a nice article highlighted with the QR code in the New Yorker. And for the modern age, it might be the transition from light bulbs to LEDs. So LEDs are 99% more efficient than light bulbs, and most of us replaced our light bulbs with LEDs. But at the same time, we put LEDs in many more places than before because they're so convenient and so easy to place. So in total, we probably have more energy consumption from light in the area of LEDs than light bulbs. Although the single LED is much more efficient, the overall consumption increased. And that's something that always happens with efficiency gains. We always spend this gain in efficiency in additional consumption. So whenever we try to improve efficiency, we also need to look at total consumption and see, are we really hitting a target here, or are we just making more room to do the same again and again? Something that's important wherever you are, and you can look it up either here or Walton Data or just search for it. It's a thing called carbon intensity. Basically, that says It is the amount of CO2 emissions you get per kilowatt hours of electricity. And the average in Europe is still 300 grams, and for the world is almost half a kilogram. So per kilowatt hours, per 1 hour of dishwasher, you emit 300 grams in Europe of CO2 emissions. And you can use this number, specific to a nation maybe, or a region, to calculate your emissions for the scanners. And you've seen how much energy they consume, and this is how we also calculated our data. Now the thing is that our primary energy consumption in the world always goes up. That also connects to this Jevons paradox thing. So we always consume more and more energy. If we consider that we know that less than 0.5% of modality, 50% are turned off during off hours, and then our modalities are inefficient, as I've shown, and we have a lot of CTs and MRIs around the world and PET CTs and so forth. This is huge in terms of savings if we optimize it by using those steps I showed. There's good news. There's actually good news that right now around 41% the global share of electricity production comes from clean energy, but at the same time our emissions and the demand is still increasing. And if you look at primary energy, this is not only electricity but all the energy, we only had around 18% from clean energy, nuclear and renewables. Fossil fuels still dominate the picture here. So the executive summary for today is, in order to lower energy consumption, we need to measure and monitor the energy waste. And then it's the very first, very basic, and I sound like a broken record, but we need to turn it off. If you have your devices running during the night or not using it, just turn it off. The gains are immense compared to other things you can do. Optimized protocols and scheduling is good, but you make room for more scheduling, so you reduce the per patient emissions, but the overall consumption you don't reduce, you actually increase them. Think about what you store in packs. That could be also interesting, also quite cost saving, because most vendors, they bill by the number of scans you have per year. Think about improving the usage of low carbon imaging like ultrasound and X-ray. And low value imaging, I know it's a controversial topic, there's a lot going on, but it's something we can do, and we can hopefully engage with our referring physicians using also sustainability as an argument to improve the yield of our diagnostic imaging. So again, broken record, turn it off. But I want to put it differently. In radiology, we're actually quite good with numbers. We're good with workload tracking, turnaround times. We have to measure radiation dose, the revenue, the budget. Everyone is looking at those numbers. And I think energy consumed emissions is just one more factor in this and shouldn't be some exotic element somewhere else, but could be something which you use to kind of steer your department and look where you're going. And we think sustainability is like a holistic approach. It means look at your staff workload, at your budget, at your resources and energy consumption, and have this as an approach, as a philosophy to then say, well, we want to do the same thing we like, but in the same quality, in the same way for the next years and in the future. We don't want to overdo things, we just corridor in a healthy corridor. And before we end, here's something to read. It's actually coming from somewhere else. This guy is one of the board members of the top insurers in the world, and he wrote a post on LinkedIn, I think, and can read it up here. And he says, well, the climate crisis may be the end of capitalism, because insurers will not insure areas where there's flooding and risk and so forth. So we will get no mortgages, there's no real estate market, no asset protection, no investment means no capitalism. And he says that if we're heading towards a world with +3 degrees Celsius, that's a point of no return. And he says this is just not more weather, it's totally different, and we don't know where we're going there. So I found that's interesting, another perspective on this whole topic coming from the insurance industry, where they see the threat, and I think they're experts in threat assessment. And with that, thank you very much for your time and attention. This is actually a team here that's doing all this and looking into this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Heye. I have to say that Dr. Heye is a radiologist with 20 years experience and has for 12 years been working at University Hospital Basel. Yes, if I'm correct. And you are actually responsible for the for the IT strategy department. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that's why you cleared us about a little bit about the strategy that we have to follow, you know, in this sustainability. For the one that joined us later, I have to remind you that this course is actually the second one in a series of sustainability. We'll have another three for the entire year. The next one will be on the 30th of June. And I have also to say that if you want to watch the course, it will be on demand for 1 week. And afterwards, it will be available with the premium educational package. And the course has also 1 credit, but you have to also via email, you have to follow and respond to the evaluation form in order to get the credit. The next speaker, it's actually Dr. Rebecca Berger. Is a radiologist registered at Imperial College Healthcare, London, with a keen interest in sustainability. And she's been involved in several projects focused on reducing the environmental impact of medical practices, and she is actually committed to advancing greener practices within the healthcare sector. I have to welcome you, Rebecca, and give you also the microphone to present us today.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I will just share my slide. So thank you. So my name is Rebecca, as you heard, and I'm just going to talk to you about this project that I've been doing at Imperial with a number of other people, looking at the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the long-term data storage of CT reformats. And we'll discuss some mitigation strategies and how we can implement that into our own institution. I don't have any conflict of interest to disclose. So as we have heard earlier, and as we're all aware, radiology is a big contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the big kind of components of that is the storage of data, is the storage of our images. And as the number of studies that we're doing is increasing, the amount of data that we're storing is also exponentially increasing. And when we looked into it, specifically in kind of CT studies, we found that not only are the number of CT studies that we're doing increasing, but the size of the studies themselves is also increasing. Between 2016 and 2020, the size of an average CT has nearly tripled. And so we wanted to look into kind of why it was that these studies were getting so big, and that we found that not only were we storing just the kind of the original axial thin slice image, but we were also storing a lot of what we call kind of secondary reformats. So these are things like sagittal, coronal reconstructions, thick slices, lung MIPS, all of which on our kind of modern PAC scanners, we can just recreate from the original image. So we're storing a lot of additional data with no kind of added benefit. So what we therefore wanted to look at is what proportion of the data that we're saving, these non-essential reformats, and therefore what is the carbon impact of storage. And then as a secondary aim, we modeled some mitigation strategies. So we looked specifically at endometrial cancer staging CT, chest, abdomen, and pelvises at our centre. And for each patient, we recorded the number of multiplanar reformats, MIPS, etc., that have been stored. And then on a certain subset, we looked at the total size of the whole CT packet, and then we looked at the size of the individual components. So this is one of our patients, and as you can see here in the middle left, this is the original axial acquisition, 663 slices. We've got thick slices, we've got lung windows, we've got coronal reconstructions, we've got sagittal reconstruction, and we've got MIPS. And these are all files that have been stored for kind of however many years, and we don't need to be storing them. We then developed a capacity model to estimate the projected instance of storage demand using our own file size data and then epidemiological projected cancer incidence in the UK. And then we developed an energy model using power usage effectiveness to evaluate the total usage energy. And that was between the IT equipment energy that we're using and then between the network servers and data storage facility. We modeled the effect of two mitigation strategies. So one was based on the NHS Records Management Code of Practice, and that is a short data retention policy of 8 years. So local storage for 8 years, followed by transfer to a place of deep storage, which has negligible energy consumption. And we also had a look at transferring to cloud storage. So this was what we found, and I'll just draw your attention to the box highlighted in yellow, which was of the total overall size of a CT study, only 35% of that was the actual useful original axial acquisition. The other 65% was all these secondary reformats. If we just look at that in a different way, so this bit in blue, this is what we needed to be storing. This is the useful information, and then everything else is all secondary reformats that we can just recreate from ourselves on packs. So there's a lot of data here that we're storing that we just don't need to be storing. When we looked at our modelling, so this is our annual and cumulative projected greenhouse gas emissions within the UK. And the top on the red, this is our kind of business as usual. If we saw all the reformats and duplicates, and then the bottom in black is if we only stored the axial source series only images. And over 20 years, if we only store the essential data, that is a 63% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So we go from 349 megatons of CO2 equivalent to 107 over 20 years. If we looked at the effect of our mitigation strategies, so again in the top in red, this is our business as usual. And then if we only stored the axial only images combined with the short data retention policy, so that's local storage for 8 years and then transfer to deep storage, that is an 81% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. And if we combine axial only storage with cloud storage, that is a 93% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions over a 20-year period, just from not storing any kind of unnecessary data. So I hope I've convinced you that that's a kind of a worthwhile thing for us to be focusing on and looking at. And therefore we want to think about how we can implement this into our own institutions. And in the ideal world, we'd only therefore be storing our axial original source imaging, and would have a really robust departmental policy for long-term data storage. But in terms of bringing this change in gradually, what we've been doing at Imperial is we've piloted only storing the axial images for staging scans for cancer, so kind of focusing on that area that we've looked at, and focusing on the kind of high volume scans, and that just involves updating the reformat protocols and letting the radiographers know about the change. And then it's important some kind of post-implementation surveillance. So making sure both that the change is being adhered to, but also that everyone is aware of kind of why we're doing this, everyone's happy, and everyone is on board. In terms of future steps, this can then be expanded into more kind of subspecialty scans, and more subspecialty areas. You can look at appointing kind of sustainability champions within each each kind of subspecialty who might have more of an idea of what reformats are being stored. So, for example, a lot of our MSK CTs are still storing kind of coronal and sagittal reconstructions that we just don't particularly need to. So it's about getting people into all those different areas who are on board with the concept and can help implement these new protocols. We have only focused on CTs just for kind of a point of principle and again, piloting the change. But we can also think about MRI sequences. Do we need to be doing all the MRI sequences that we are? You know, we've heard about the energy consumption of doing MRIs earlier, so it's something to think about as well. And then as a more kind of maybe a slightly harder change to implement and a more long-term thing, thinking about our long-term data storage and policy to get in place for that. So revising our storage protocols is a very easily implementable way to significantly lower our greenhouse gas emissions without having any impact on patient care. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very nice presentation. So I think that we can start already the Q&A session. Yeah. So I have for Dr. Heye some questions, probably because you just finished, Rebecca. It's a great presentation. Switching off the CT scanner and switching on again will take a long time. How we are going to manage emergency scans? This is the first question, Tobias.
Yeah, as I mentioned, if you have a high volume emergency room and you have during the night and off hours you have a lot of emergencies, then don't switch it off. You shouldn't do that. But you have clinical scanners that are scheduled to operate from Monday to Friday from I don't know, 7 to 8 or something. Then there's the time on the weekend, there's the time during the night where you don't use it. If you don't switch it off, that would be close to the 70% reduction potential that you have there. You're not using it, and there's no penalty involved. There's nothing that suggests that you need to keep it on. And I would encourage you, because there are sometimes these myths that have been ingrained in all the people involved, from techs to radiologists, from former times where we had these very old MRI machines, old CTs that you had to crank up to get booted up and so forth. You had to kick the machine to multiple times of starting them. That's not the case anymore. Measure the time, how long they start to boot up, and then you have your information. And even the vendors, we are talking a lot with the vendors, they say they can give you statistics how often these devices were successful in booting up the first time. So these metrics exist. They actually monitored like plane turbines. Vendors constantly collect data from your system. So they have all that information, and they can help you figure out how to run this. But if you find a device that's hanging around idle and you're not using it, just switch it off.
So we are switching off just ourselves, or the entire center, for example, at the night. Yeah, when you switch off, you switch it on your own, the computer and the operators, the MRI, the CTs and all this, or it's something else that switch off the entire center, yeah, let's say, or hospital.
That will be the next stage. It's something we're pushing the vendors to get something where this will be automated, but it doesn't exist yet. There are some systems that may let you schedule maybe a boot up in the morning, so you don't have to come in and push the button. But for now, you have to implement a culture, and we did this, and with these dashboards, you can distribute this, you can show the savings, you can turn it into the positive story. It doesn't have to be, well, you have to turn it off. That usually doesn't work, as we know. But you find a system that works, and you reinforce it. You have to do it over and over with everything running a department. It will work for some time, and then it will kind of come down again. But right now, it's a manual process. And there are solutions maybe for the PCs, and actually printers have a very nice way of automatic booting them up, putting them in sleep mode and so. And people can actually, you can push that by the network to all the printers. I'm not sure, I looked in our printers, we don't use them anymore. We have a lot of printers standing on, but no one uses it, maybe very occasionally. So again, I mean, it's great what Rebecca showed. The story in medicine and healthcare is all the devices are hanging out there, are idle, and if you start looking into this, no one bothered to find out how we should use them. Because we always focus on patient care, and even now with increasing imaging numbers, even more, but it's really quite easy to have a big impact by just doing little things, but you have to do them manually for now.
And we have to educate, I think, all the radiologists and technicians and actually the entire system to educate them, to give all this information to the next generation and to the other colleagues. Yeah, it's our responsibility, I think, to educate them. So thank you.
Mark Burgmans put it nicely last year at ESOR. At home, you act totally different, right? You wouldn't let your faucet running, you wouldn't leave your lights on, you wouldn't leave your car running in your garage. We do the opposite at our hospital. So it's just the concept is known to us, but we don't feel the ownership. If we change that, it should work.
Yeah, it's still hard. We are at the beginning, and depending on the region, because each country has different ideas. For example, in Romania, there are a lot of companies that are doing things about sustainability, but not that much in healthcare system. Mainly in other part, industry or green parks and all this, but not in healthcare. So it's really hard to educate the people here to understand that there is a need for something like this.
And I would align it with costs. So there's also some costs involved, and they are not negligible for MRI and CT and the cooling. We haven't really talked about cooling. It's even more than. So if you shut down stuff, you save really a lot of money.
Yeah, it's about the money also at the end. And another question also for you, Tobias. Dr. Heye mentioned the vendor stimulating turns off longer than 1 hour. Do you know why 1 hour and not, for example, 15 minutes if the startup time is fast enough? If you understood the question.
I think that's a bit of a safety margin. So you have to decide for yourself what's practical, if you want to switch it on and off all the time, as long as they don't have a real standby mode or low power mode. It really depends how you want to do it. I guess it's an area where you can say, if you know that you're going on a lunch break, you definitely know for sure you're not using the scanner. Shutting it down for an hour is a good option. And for angio as well, I mean, 3 to 4 minutes boot up time is nothing. It used to be what PCs did before a couple of decades. So it really depends how you work, where you see opportunities. There's no need to do all this. It's just options. But I think an hour that they posted it is just a good number where for most of us that should work. Like it's a good transition time. It's not based on facts. You're right. You could turn it off and on every 50 minutes. If that's practical or not, maybe not. I mean, there's a comparison to our cars, right? Cars nowadays, if you stop them at the traffic light, they shut down the engine by themselves. And if you hit the gas brake pedal, they boot up again. So similar, when the machines evolve in this way, that would be great. But right for now, we are the ones pushing the button. So find out if it's practical or not. Every shutdown helps, but you don't have to get crazy and then turn it off multiple times during the day. It would be better. I've seen papers where they compared stuff. If you have a device that has sporadic use during the day, optimize the schedule and then shut it down. It's much better, even like an X-ray machine or so.
Yeah, another question is, even if we shut down the CT machine, after turning it on, it needs tube warming up and it increased energy consumption. How will we overcome it? I mean, I think that this is the question. If when it's warming up, it increases energy consumption or not. This is what I understand. So it's also for you, I think.
It's actually an interesting question, and that even comes up from the local service technicians, and we looked into the data and it's not true. The startup time does take energy, but it's not super much. It's not something where you then decide to shut it down like after idle time of 30 minutes to 60, that you don't save. You start saving around that time. It's a little peak. It's like a scan, but the peak is very short. So the consumption under the area is really low. The problem with all those machines is it's not the scanning peaks and the warming up. It's the constant power draw of these levels that I've shown. They're quite high. So that's the big question mark. They haven't been built in a way that energy was a concern at all. An MRI is at 18 kilowatts if you don't do anything with it. That's huge. That's a huge number, and it's not doing anything. It's just there. So for most machines, this warming, starting up thing is not something that should stop you from shutting it down, starting maybe around an hour or so.
Okay, and we can use AI to reduce energy consumption, but how much energy will AI need for development and implementation? Will this reduce total carbon emission? I don't know if you both have any idea about AI and energy consumption.
I'm a bit
It's the
skeptical
next
about
step.
this whole AI will come and save us, because itself is a big energy consumption, big cooling, big water. I think what I'm trying to show is there's so many things we can do ourselves quite easily. It's literally just hitting a switch and the thing goes down at the end of your workday. That shouldn't be too hard, so we need to call in AI. Where I can see AI is helping us in finding the right indication, maybe addressing low-value imaging, helping in predicting if a scan is necessary or not, and optimizing scheduling. So you really know, do we all need this or not? In those basic operations, maybe not. Where it's great is all those boost sequences that boost up MRI scanning. So your scan time for a protocol gets reduced drastically. That's great. But I think you add another component that needs another energy consumption, and then that's the problem. We always add things and our total consumption keeps increasing. We need to look into how to be more efficient, but also controlling the total consumption.
Yeah, maybe AI will help us, like Rebecca said, in how are we going to use the PACS system? For example, it's another question. How about reduction, contrast injection, or even develop virtual CE images, synthetic contrast? This might also reduce the energy consumption. Do you agree? I don't know. Both of you. It's for both of you. So AI and also this reduction in contrast injection or develop this virtual synthetic contrast. What do you think about this?
Maybe Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I think there's a lot of stuff on reducing contrast and contrast recycling, and ways that we can use AI on, as you say, maximizing the efficiency. I think sometimes it's worth, before we get kind of too excited about, the really high technology ideas, you say, just focusing on the basics. That is often the kind of the really high yield stuff that we can do on, turning off the computer, turning off machines. Is often that, doing the basic stuff well can make the biggest savings, I think I find.
Yeah, actually, I think the last lecture on 13th of October from this sustainability series is on contrast agent management. So maybe there we can find other information about how to manage contrast agent and to be more sustainable in this field. But anyway, I saw that you, Rebecca, you have done only on CT, yes? CT sequences and all this, send it to the PACS. So you have no idea about MRI, ultrasound, because now the PACS system, we have from X-ray, from CT, from mammo, from PET-CT, all these data are stored in PACS system. And no matter what reconstruction, MIPS, or other ideas that we have as radiologists, they are all saved there. So there is a strategy, or I don't know, can you give us some guideline on how to do it better with all the others also, or you don't have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, we focused on CT because that was, I mean, CT is such a big component of radiology and of the data that we're storing. And it's so easy to say that we don't need to be storing coronal reconstructions. That's very easily kind of duplicate data. But it's also just starting to think about it and thinking about what we're storing. When it was previously filmed, there was a very physical limitation on how much we could store. Whereas now that it's all just in packs, you just pull anything you want, and people aren't really thinking about it. So I think any data that we store has a carbon cost, and it's fine if it's clinically relevant. That's absolutely fine. But it's just starting to think about being mindful about what we're storing and how long we're storing it for. Do we have a plan? Because this is only going to become more and more of an issue as we're just storing things kind of indefinitely, and it's just starting to think about it.
Maybe I can add to this. I heard numbers that in 2040, the amount of data stored in the world is really increasing. And the greatest proportion is medical data. And within that, radiology images will be the greatest, like volume-wise. To just consider how much space our data needs compared to like text documents by the rest. So just a couple of letters and lab values, they don't take up much space. But our images, maybe digital pathology will overtake us at some point. But it's a great concept that Rebecca looked into this, because this is also a blank area where no one bothered to find out what you can do better without compromising anything for the patient care.
Do you have legal issues in your countries? In how many years do you have to store this data, for example?
Well, I think that is all kind of being figured out. I mean, we looked at, say, the NHS records code of practice says you want to store it all locally for 8 years and then transfer to deep storage. But again, you kind of think, how long are we keeping it in deep storage? And should there be a plan for kind of how many years after a patient's died, for example, that we're storing their images? Yeah, I think this is all kind of conversations we need to have and plans that need to be set in place now.
This is another thing, like for AI, the legal problem, actually. How many years, how many data, or how long you have to keep all these images. So you store only the axial, yes, right now. And then you do reconstruction when you reviewing the image.
Yeah, so that's what we're starting to bring in, is storing just the axial. Because I mean, pack shortcuts, for us, you just press C and you get a coronal. That just doesn't need to be a separate file. So bringing that in now, it's a bit trickier to go back and kind of retrospectively clean up the data. So we're trying to bring it in now, just storing kind of as little as we can.
Yeah, so what I found now is that we have to do small steps before the big steps. So what you've told us today, the small steps in a sustainable radiology department idea. And it's really great that you bring us and brought today to us all this idea. Another question, could it be possible, an idea that PACS would start auto-deletion of unnecessary reconstruction in the future? Yeah, it's a good idea. Auto-deletion. Yeah, probably we'll do it.
Yeah,
Please.
I mean, I think, it's before it even gets created, the reconstruction, that's the kind of idea that we're not even, making it on the scanner. But yeah, auto-deletion, possibly.
It's a possibility, yeah. I think that the time's run out. I want to thank you again for taking time, for being here with us. I don't see any more questions from the audience. I hope that everyone started or are thinking about the sustainable radiology department. Me, for sure, I will do it. Again, I have to say that on-demand access for 1 week for this lecture, for this course, and then you can find all the information and all the lectures with the educational premium package for all of you. Also, it's 1 credit for this course, and if you have to have it, this 1 credit, you have to fill the evaluation form, which will be sent via email to all the participants. Tobias or Rebecca, if you want to add anything else?
I mean, I always have to say just turn it off, but basically that's it for my.
So we have to turn off now the
This as well.
source in order to energy reduction. Yes. Thank you all of you. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to the European Society Office and for the involvement and doing all this to educate people in a sustainable department. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Tobias. Thank you, all of us.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye to all.